Hello everyone and welcome to Reentry. In this video, we will take a look at some of the new features that I've added in the 0.96 update. So first of all, the 0.96 update is mostly around the Mercury program. So I want to kind of go back into the Mercury program and revisit the experience you have from, preparing the capsule for launch, ignition, getting into space, and eventually back to Earth and completing missions. So one of the first new updates is the dynamic skybox. So you can see that I'm currently now on the launch pad in a cold and dark state. I've already gone through most of the checklists to prepare the craft for launch, just to kind of save you some time in this video. But you might have noticed that the skybox has completely changed. The dynamic skybox takes the date and time and the latitude and longitude and calculates the sun position and then generates a skybox that should reflect the correct position of the sun. So what you can see now is that we're kind of in the early morning. The sun is slowly rising there in the background, and the spacecraft is still dark. And everything that's left to do is to do some final checks and get the spacecraft ready for launch. What I wanted to show you is how this dynamic skybox works. So there's a background process that runs a check every 10 seconds or so and then updates the skybox. This is quite an intensive calculation, so I kind of wanted to offload that in a separate thread, and then every 10 seconds copy this over to the main buffer. So this means that every 10 seconds you might notice that there is some calculations going on. So what you can see now is that if I now time scale closer to launch, let's say 1 hour, and I stop time scaling, you can see that the skybox now has updated 20 minutes later than what you previously saw. And I can keep going until, let's go to 40 minutes before ignition. You can see that the skybox updates. And this is an ongoing process, so if you want to watch this in real time, obviously you can, and you won't notice kind of the snapping between the positions. But during time scale, I stop updating the time box until you're done time scaling. So that's just good for you to know. And you can see that the entire sky and the clouds and everything kind of looks way more beautiful than it used to do. And now I'm going to timescale all the way until ignition and do the final checks. It's 1 minute and 55 seconds. I'm going to turn up some lights. There we go. The next thing is to set the craft to ready, make sure that the squibs and the auto retro jettison squibs are set to arm, and everything else should be fine. Indicators seem okay. Perfect. We're now ready for ignition. So now you can see that the sky is turning more and more blue as we kind of get into the early morning hours here. This dynamic skybox will be applied to Project Mercury first, and once I kind of refine the system a little bit, I will roll it out to Gemini for kind of a second phase of the implementation, and lastly Apollo, all in later updates. So I think that covers the main thing about the dynamic skybox. Since this is a new feature, I would love to get some feedback on it, just to make sure that it works okay in lower performance system. For example, how long time does the calculation take, and so on. I've been doing some preliminary testing on kind of low-end hardware that I have available, but you never know kind of what experiences you might have. So the next thing that I wanted to discuss is that the Mercury manual has received an update. So the manual will be updated and uploaded in time for the release of 0.96, which means that you can access to PDF file and read the latest changes to Mercury. This is the first iteration of a manual update. So when I'm speaking of a manual, I mean the Mercury flight manual that comes with the game that you can read up on to study and learn the spacecraft. And another update I've done in Mercury is to add a recovery ship. So when you're doing a landing and a splashdown into the ocean, you will see a recovery ship in the background. This is also a first implementation, and I've already rolled this out on the Mercury branch. However, we have staging. The recovery ship has been added to Mercury only and will be updated in Gemini and Apollo in the next few updates. If you think about the recovery helicopter and so on, this is also something in the works and something that I wish to do. I've been trying to reach out to various helicopter manufacturers that were involved in the space program to see if I can use realistic models. If not, then I will have a kind of a generic helicopter model. Another main thing that I've been fixing is the ASCS updates. So the autopilot that's currently guiding this one now into orbit, but is also responsible for maintaining a retrograde attitude or a re-entry attitude based on the attitude select switch here. So if the ASCS mode select is set to norm, the autopilot is engaged, and if everything else is set up correctly, the autopilot will have full control of the spacecraft. One of the biggest issues I've been hearing from players in the Mercury program is kind of how the ASCS can go crazy, get into unrecoverable rates and attitudes, and is not able to hold the correct attitude. And this is apparent on lower end hardwares. So I've been going through a process where I've been trying to simulate a lower end hardware and playing at kind of limited frame rate, and I was able to reproduce some of these issues. So in this latest update, I've been going through a lot of the changes in the ASCS that should fix this. So please let me know if you still have issues and enter kind of unrecoverable states in the ASCS. Keep in mind that the ASCS can fail. Even with failures off, it can get into a weird state, and you will need to switch to manual to recover it from it yourself. As you might also see if you've been playing the 0.95 update, is that there used to be some, if I now switch off the lights, for example, let's have some lights on, just so I can see. There used to be some light bleed issues where the panels, the seat, and everything had kind of very strong lights on them. Of course, I'm getting some light through the window now, but you can see that all of that light bleeding bug has now been removed. There's no glowing parts in the cabin anymore. So that's also something I've been going through in this update. So every single part inside of the Mercury capsule has been revisited and configured to calculate lights correctly. The biggest part of this update is how the missions should end. So if you decide to end the mission early before completing the mission, or if you splash down and complete all of the objectives and so on, you should get this mission accomplished screen with which basically said mission accomplished. You can decide if you want to end the session or if you want to go back to the main menu, and you can select which one you wanted to execute. So one of the biggest changes in this update is that I've been working on a debrief system that continuously tracks the progress of the mission from start to end, no matter if you start from the pad or if you start in orbit. You will be able to kind of see how you have executed the mission and see a timeline of key events. So you can, always go back and analyze how you performed and executed a mission once the mission is complete. So for example, in this case, I've now prepared the cockpit for launch. I've done ignition. We had a couple of staging on the way. And what I'm also going to do is to switch to manual mode, rate command, to consume some fuel from my manual control fuel tank. You can see that the fuel is spent. The fuel goes down quite quickly if you continuously fire all the thrusters. There we go. I will also try to see if I can recover from this. And then I'll switch to normal and let the autopilot consume some of the control fuel here. Let's see if the spacecraft will be able to recover from this weird attitude. I noticed that there are some offsets or some rates even after the ASCS has, decided that it's in an okay state. This is because the ASCS is not able to 100% remove all of the rates. There are still some rates available after the ASCS has been done, and it will slightly try to fix this eventually and get more and more into a better state over time. So the ASCS will be working a little bit more than it used to do before. A second issue is that with the ASCS, and if you were running on kind of a lower frame rate, the fuel consumption would be way too high. So the fuel tank would deplete very fast. This has also been fixed in 0.96. So for the last demo in the Mercury program, before I jump into the Apollo cockpit, is that I wanted to kind of show you the mission debrief system. So I'm going to just hit end session. And now you can see that I get this overview of the mission. You can still interact a little bit with the views and so on in the background, but the mission debrief will show you what mission you were playing, a summary of the mission, the goals, and whether you kind of were able to complete the mission goals or not. And in this mission, wanted me to land, so I didn't complete the splashdown, which means that the mission was not completed. It keeps track of all my key moments, so you see that ignition, staging was at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Tower jettison was 20 seconds later. We had MECO at 5:15 and staging at 5:18, and we have an insertion. If I would fire the retros, more and more key moments would apply, such as drogue, chutes, everything would be kind of kept track on. In addition, you can see that there are some key KPIs here. You can see that I have 62% of manual fuel left, 77% of auto fuel. I didn't consume too much oxygen. My maximum velocity was 25,733 feet per second, and my maximum altitude so far is 83.1 nautical miles of altitude. I can also see that this is my ascent trajectory relative to height and nautical miles over time, and also fuel consumption. So you can see that the blue one here is auto fuel. This is the ASCS trying, and then I also spent a lot of manual fuel just to consume a little bit of that. So in this way, you can now go ahead back kind of to see the history of your mission, how you executed, and analyze some of these graphs. More and more things will be added over time, and if you have some good suggestions on KPIs or graphs that you want to see here, please let me know so I can just add them. This system is fully generic, so I will also be going ahead and adding this into Gemini in 0.97 and Apollo in 0.98. It takes some time to integrate everything, but once it's done, I think that it will improve the experience of completing missions on all of these modules that Reentry supports. You can also, of course, go in and hit export to save a PNG file of the various graphs. These are now stored in the export folder on Reentry's app data folder. This is where you can see all the logs and save states and so on. Then you can go ahead and hit exit session. And what I'm going to do now is to quickly switch the textures to low, just to reduce some loading time, and I'll jump into Apollo, and I might as well load a scenario where I have both the Lunar module and the command module in orbit around the moon. So one of the main features in the command module, in addition to some bug fixes that you can read more about in the patch notes, is that I've been going through all of the digits that appear on the command module panels as well as the Lunar module panels. Previously, I used a font to render a number directly, such as, for example, on the EMS, you would see the delta V or a range counting down or up, and you could kind of see the font with variable spacing between numbers kind of jump back and forth and kind of destroying the visual quality of these numbers. So what I've done now is to go through every single digit in the entire command module and changed it to a more realistic digit system, which is fully custom made for Reentry. And now that the panel has been loaded, I can go to delta V, for example, or let's see, we can increase this one. There we go. And I can go to delta V set, and you can see that it counts down, and there's a negative sign on this side. I see that the decimal is removed, so I'll of course go back and fix that. The mission timer is also been updated. You can see that it no longer jumps back and forth. Everything is its own digit with its own space and doesn't cause any visual issues on that. And the coloring and numbers are more realistic. You can obviously see that the same was done on the AGC. And if we go down here, you can see that this AGC also got the new numbers as well as the mission timer down here. The AGC have been using a similar numbering system. It's just that I've gone back and changed it a little bit to better match reflect reality in some of this cornering and such. The next update is in the Lunar module. You can see that all the digits on panel 1 has been changed. Use this new digit system as well. And yeah, I think that's it for 0.96. I do hope that you will enjoy this update, and if you experience issues, you can always revert to a previous branch using the Steam Betas tab, and of course report back to me if you experience any strange things or have feedback or ideas or suggestion, just as usual. So yeah, thanks for watching, and thanks for playing Reentry.